Good evening, afternoon or morning, depending where you are, tuning in to this streamed event online on behalf of the Ethereal Society worldwide. And it's my honor to be making this presentation on behalf of the Society, not just in Europe or just in America, but throughout the globe, wherever we're represented. And we do have thousands of people who are very interested in our work and in our beliefs and are waiting for a statement following the Pentagon release last month. And to the best of my knowledge, as far as I can tell anyway, we're the oldest international UFO organization. And we are currently very active and have been since 1955, every day, every night, in some part of the world, for 365 days a year, up to the present day, and we're still very active today. But this year, we've been validated in one very definite respect. We made a statement, and I have to say this is well before my time, may I quickly say that. But we, the Ethereal Society, made a statement in 1958. I've only been secretary here in Europe for 41 years, so that was a long time before my days. But in 1958, in our journal, Cosmic Voice, on the cover, we stated this: flying saucers are real, flying saucers are friendly, flying saucers are extraterrestrial, your government knows this. And I believe that statement made then, over 63 years ago, has been validated by the Pentagon report released last month, whether they fully admit it or not. And so today we're stating again that UFOs are real, friendly, and alien. Governments know it. I say the Ethereal Society is validated, but really it is Dr. George King, who founded the Society, who is validated. And not only for that one statement. He was on call, and those of us who were close to him witnessed this daily. He was on call for 24 hours a day from May the 8th, 1954 until his passing on July the 12th, 1997. That's over 43 years. And again, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think you'll find another claim like that. Let me repeat it. He was on call for 24 hours a day, and he could be called in the middle of the night by cosmic intelligences, and I will explain that. I know that sounds very far out. I don't expect you to take my word for it, but I am stating it. From May the 8th, 1954 until his passing on July the 12th, 1997. And during that time, he received and he spread the word of alien intelligences, and this is a very important part of it, who come from this solar system. Now, I am aware of a number of claims, as you may well be, of people who think they're in contact, believe they're in contact with intelligences from other planets. But the ones I've come across, in nearly all cases, think they're in contact with intelligences from a distant constellation, from many, many light years away, such as the Pleiades or some other constellation. But of course, if you really think about it, the planets most integrally linked and concerned, if you like, part of the same family as our Mother Earth, are the ones who are going to be the most involved, interested, connected with our situation. They'd also be the ones who would be most affected should we really misuse, we've been bad enough already, but catastrophically misuse nuclear power through atomic explosion. And that has been a major concern, and still is, of these intelligences. But Dr. King, as well as making these statements and campaigning for these statements about flying saucers, course, they're now called UFOs, and I do realize that a UFO is an unidentified flying object, and of course, not every unidentified flying object is an extraterrestrial spacecraft, but it's used generically now to describe what used to be a flying saucer. And a percentage of UFOs, I'm absolutely sure, are extraterrestrial spacecraft, and I'm going to tell you why. But Dr. King pioneered the concept of a spiritual dimension in UFOs, and I think that is accepted now. It certainly wasn't. It certainly wasn't when I was talking to other UFO organizations, for example, in the 1980s and the 1990s. They didn't like, some of them, the spiritual aspect coming into it. They wanted to keep it to the physical, the nuts and bolts, as they used to call it, only. But I think even people now, for the most part, I won't say everyone, but for the most part, who aren't really drawn to spiritual matters, they accept it's a vital part of the UFO movement. And Dr. King was a major pioneer in that, and a major pioneer in the 1950s in talking about life on higher dimensions. And that's now today, 2021, no longer a concept restricted to spiritualists or metaphysicians. It's the cutting edge of aspects of astronomy, certainly astrophysics. And he always spoke of life in this solar system as being on a higher frequency or energy level, and therefore not necessarily visible or detectable by us. Again, very strange to some people at the time. Now, when I think it's 4% of the energy and matter of the universe is meant to be visible, not so strange. And he was a pioneer of concepts like that, and the world, I hope, is catching up, but it hasn't fully caught up yet. There's far more to come. But getting back to this major event, on June the 25th, the Pentagon released its long-awaited report on UAPs, as they now call them, or unidentified aerial phenomena. And you notice how they changed the term from UFO to UAP. I think they call it branding. I think it's an attempt to minimize the embarrassment when they have to admit that they have lied, that they haven't told the full truth, and that they, if you were really generous to them, you just have to say they were wrong. It's one of the two. Either they were lying or they were wrong, when for so long they tried to say these things don't exist. And they've come up with many things. One of the things that was quite prevalent until now was that these are all advanced American technology being experimented with, and they're being cited maybe by naval officers, and they're so advanced that we don't know what they are. They've given up on that now, because some of these craft, and I'll go into this, have a technology way beyond the USA. Not just a little bit beyond it, and you'll see when I come up with some of the things these craft can do, way beyond it. And just in case anyone wants to come up with this, way beyond China or Russia. China or Russia, they're also looking into UAPs, by the way. And so is Japan, I believe, and so are other countries. And Britain, in case you think I'm criticizing America, I'm not particularly. Britain is even worse. Britain is ridiculous on this topic. I say this as a British citizen. And having witnessed a minister in the House of Lords last month saying, on the one hand, we're taking this very, very seriously, I think was the exact statement, and in the same debate saying we have nobody at all in the Ministry of Defence working on this or looking into it. And again, if you believe that, okay, then they're grossly incompetent, but I don't think many people, according to opinion polls, not many people do believe them. And that's their problem, hence, I suppose, their attempt to rebrand and so on. So getting back to the release of this document on June the 25th, they changed the name to UAPs, It's an attempted maybe damage limitation, but you can't damage limitation your way out of the truth. And I'll just tell you one of Dr. King's favorite titles for a lecture on UFOs. UFOs are here to stay. He loved that title, and they are. I actually remember, and I won't embarrass them today by revealing which one, probably one of the largest UFO organizations in Britain, not as old as the Ethereal Society, but old. They announced, I think in the 1990s, that the UFO topic was dead. And I told them at the time, I said, you can't stop UFOs coming. UFOs are here to stay, and that organization has now, I think the people who are running it then aren't running it now, and it's still continuing. For over a year now, information has been leaking out about the so-called Tic Tac. That, if you don't know what a Tic Tac is, it's a peppermint. And that's how it was described in this sighting. So we've gone from crockery to peppermint. Flying saucer. Actually, I did find an 11th century Japanese document describing a sighting of a UFO, and they did call it a flying earthenware vessel. So even flying saucer isn't new. But there we are. It's not quite the great Vimanas of the Hindu scripts, the beautiful flying celestial vehicles, or even the great cloud in which the Lord descended when he delivered the 10 Commandments to Moses. We've got a peppermint now. But nevertheless, at least they're being more honest about it. It was filmed, observed, and tracked by radar in 2004, confirmed as genuine by the US Navy in 2019, and released on video by the Pentagon with 2 other cases last year. And you're probably aware of it. I'm not going into all the details of it. They're easy to find on the internet. If you can't find it, it's on my website, and I'm sure many others. And I would just say, though, that the sighting of different kinds of objects was also predicted by the Ethereal Society in our newsletter in 1973. And you can check this. And it was predicted there would be an increase in activity of extraterrestrial spacecraft, and that other types of intelligences would be visiting in their vehicles. And since then, we have had other sightings. Because if you go back to the 50s and the 60s, you'll find mainly it was the disc-shaped flying saucer and the oblong, which used to be called, wait for it, the cigar-shaped object. We had a cigar. I actually had a sighting of a cigar-shaped object myself when I was at university. Now we've had conical, triangular, many different shapes, and lately the Tic Tac. So that too was predicted by the Ethereal Society following a communication delivered by an extraterrestrial intelligence to Dr. George King. So the unclassified, and bear in mind please that this is the unclassified document that's been released, and you can get hold of this. But there was also a classified document which I understand to be 10 times as long as the unclassified one. It's an unclassified preliminary assessment of unidentified aerial phenomena released last month by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. It is 8 pages long, plus a cover page. It's available. It relates to 144 incidents between 2004 and 2021. And I understand most of them to have occurred in the last 2 years, by the way. And let's not think this all began in 2004 either. That's when the Tic Tac, the first Tic Tac sighting was, but we have fantastic releases and information of extraterrestrial spacecraft before then, but they aren't covered in this particular report. The fact that it's called preliminary, I think, may be encouraging. It suggests they're going to go on with it, unlike what the British government says. It's couched in bureaucratic language. I think it tries to play it down by using, I'll give you an example. It talks about craft or objects, or as they say, UAPs, which have signature management. And if you don't know what signature management means, it sounds quite dull. and not very revealing until you find out that signature management includes the ability to control reaction to atmospheric pressure, or I should say atmospheric friction. So, for example, if one of these craft exceeds the speed of sound, they can do so without a sonic boom. Now, these details aren't all in that one document. They've come out over recent months, sometimes from a former director of national intelligence, but these are the kind of things they mean when they talk about signature management. No visible propulsion units, no heat emitted, the ability to have low visibility, among others, not to be detected on radar, should they decide not to be detected on radar, and then to be detected should they decide to be detected. And I think you could start to see here in that rather dull phrase, as a lot, if you look deeper into it. I think that's why some people were a little disappointed by the report, and others, when they really looked at it, found it to be a sensational moment, actually, in UFO history. And they have confirmed technology, as I say, vastly superior to the USA and whatever people may say to China and Russia as well, and all other countries on Earth. And it may be that this anticlimax that some have felt from the report was deliberate. It's a tried and tested political device to build up expectations, and then when something comes out, it doesn't seem as much as you thought it would be. It happens with income tax changes, it happens all the time. It's a well-known thing, and it may be deliberate, but whether it was or not doesn't really matter, because however they spin it, there is no doubt from reading this report that they have finally admitted, and this is a positive, after lying for decades, I'm talking about governments generally at different times, they have finally admitted that UFOs are real. Just as Dr. King published on the front cover of that journal in 1958, flying saucers are real. And the American government, as I say, isn't alone in it. There are others. But let's move on to the next statement. Are they friendly? I have to be honest with you, and you'll have to forgive me, but I think that's a really foolish question, if you don't mind me saying. But I'm going to not give you my opinion. I'm going to tell you what a communication with Dr. King in 1958 by a cosmic intelligence called, or given the code name Mars Sector 6, stated. It's very simple. It cannot be misunderstood, and I think it says it all. And I quote, "It is obvious that we are friendly. Had we not been, you would not exist." We wouldn't be having this talk, we wouldn't have a report, we wouldn't have different opinions, we wouldn't have so-called experts and real experts discussing the whys and wherefores of it if they weren't friendly. We'd either be destroyed, as that statement made, or we'd be enslaved, or whatever their bad intentions were would easily have been achieved if they weren't friendly. Again, the superior technology, they even have superior, according to a number of reports, telepathic knowledge about what American craft are going to do before they do it, and where they're going to go before they get there. And spacecraft with these abilities could easily have taken over the world if that was their intention. I want to refer to a book I was honored to co-author with Dr. George King at his invitation. It's his book. He invited me to very kindly to co-author it with him. It's called Contacts with the Gods from Space. And in it, I have been actually amazed looking back at it, that some of the technological aspects of extraterrestrial spacecraft are spelt out in that book. And in case you want to check them, they're on pages 35 to 37. It's very much still in print in a new edition. But it was first published, this information, 25 years ago. And I'm going to read you the extracts, or some of them, that I'm referring to, if I may. So this is straight from the book, written by Dr. King with my help. And he's talking about here extraterrestrial spacecraft. They are protected by a force field which is intensified in direct relation to the velocity of the craft. The force field protects the vessel and the occupants from atmospheric friction, counteracting the otherwise disastrous effects which could be caused by severe magnetic fluctuations which are contacted while passing through the terrestrial, ionospheric and heavy side layers at the extremely high velocity of which these craft are capable. The system of control of the natural fields of magnetic energy enables the operators to use the energy potential of existing gravitational fields, which may be used as a secondary propulsion unit to enable easy landings onto and ascents from any planetary mass. They know that gravity is dual-poled magnetic force, and they're able to reverse these poles at will. Some of these crafts have been seen to perform a reciprocal pattern of flight at fantastic speeds. Such aerobatics would only be possible if the force of gravity were known and controlled. Some vessels can be dematerialized at will by their operators and vibratory octave of their existence so changed as to become invisible to our eyesight. That was an extract from Contacts with the Gods from Space, I want to repeat, published in 1996, and that is based on Dr. King's contacts with intelligences from other worlds, and I think it's been validated, not for the first time, but really validated last month, or over recent month. But let's break it down, because it's wordy, and it's full on, and you have to really focus on it. But let me just tell you some of the very relevant information that's come out lately in this report and before it about what they now call UAPs, and these are some of their capabilities. The ability to maneuver abruptly, the ability to move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion, sudden and instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocities without signatures, low observability, positive lift apparently resisting the natural effects of Earth's gravity, control over atmospheric friction, as for example when a UFO exceeds the speed of sound without a sonic boom. Now I invite you to look at that. You'll find those things, as I say, very readily available on the internet. And I invite you to look at Contacts with the Gods from Space in those pages and see if you can see that these things were said in slightly different language, yes, but making those essential points about the hypervelocities, the ability to overcome gravity, the positive lift, where they can ascend without having to, by controlling gravity, controlling atmospheric friction, and so on, and invisibility, by the way. See if you can find that we were, in that book, 25 years ahead of some of these revelations. And check it out and hold me to it, please. These capabilities, either referred to in the Pentagon report or released in recent months by officials who would know, such as a former director of national intelligence and others. So to say Dr. King was ahead of his time is to put it mildly. He has, I believe, been validated and will be more validated as the years go by. And coming back to invisibility, this is witnessed, by the way, not just by military observers, it's been witnessed by somebody watching this. I would be amazed if there isn't somebody watching this now who hasn't seen this phenomenon of a UFO, so-called, with capabilities beyond any explainable craft, not a meteorite, not a satellite, not all a weather balloon, a Chinese lantern, all those things. Yes, you've got to investigate them, you've got to look at all the possibilities, but also to see it disappear and then reappear before them. There are many who have reported that. So there's no doubt in my mind that at least some of the UAPs referred to in the Pentagon report are extraterrestrial. They have a category to denote objects which are not either airborne clutter, natural atmospheric phenomena, US craft or foreign craft. And they call this fifth category other. But I think they just could call it alien, or most of it anyway. And, that's obviously what some of them are. They don't admit it. They say, well, we have no evidence of alien life. I think that makes them look ridiculous, actually. I don't think it helps their case. And based on many opinion polls in Britain and America, and I would guess elsewhere, people don't believe you if you're a government official. The majority of people do not believe you're telling them the truth about this subject. This is no longer a minor sort of fringe conspiracy theory. This has become the mainstream belief. It certainly wasn't when Dr. King pioneered it, and it certainly wasn't even when I started. I was told there was a clip of a show I did on Sky at Night with a person called Patrick Moore 40 years ago on BBC last week, or the week before. And in that, people were shocked at the kind of ridicule that we had to put up with in those days. The disdain, the arrogance. That particular individual, Patrick Moore, on one program I did with him, he was a very well-respected astronomer, and I'm sure he was an excellent astronomer. He wasn't a UFO expert, though, and he wasn't an alien life expert. He believed, and he stated, there is no life on any planet beyond Earth, anywhere, at one point. I think he changed that later. So we had to put up with that then. There's been a massive sea change now. The disbelievers are now in a minority. I don't want them ridiculed. I think, though, they're going in the direction of the flat earth believers. I don't want the flat earth people ridiculed either. But it's not, as we're led to believe, a tiny, fringe, eccentric conspiracy theory group anymore. I'm not saying it ever was, but it certainly isn't now. And it's what they would call now counterintuitive, I think, of government officials to say that they have no evidence that UAPs are alien in origin. If they're not in any of those other categories and they're craft with these stupendous abilities, they're alien. Let me save you some time, they're alien. So UFOs are real, UFOs are friendly, UFOs are alien. Governments know it. And may I just add that the head of NASA, who has read the classified section of this report, has stated, and I quote, "Are we alone? Personally, I don't think we are." Nor does he think, by the way, that the most advanced UAPs are from China or Russia. Why has it taken them so long to get to this stage? Certainly there's no government or military authority that wants to admit it's out of its depth. That's not what politicians like to be saying. They like to look as though they've got everything under control, whether it's a pandemic or whatever else it is. And they want the people to look to them as their leaders. And having campaigned for decades for the truth to come out, it is great, I must say, to see the tables have turned. But it's much more great, I think, for Dr. King, and I had the honor to be his spokesman in his lifetime, and I feel I still have that honor today. No, I'm not alone, but I feel I have that honor as his spokesman, and I'd like to read you something he wrote in Cosmic Voice. He was the editor of the journal, and this is what he wrote in 1958. "We're all prepared," he was referring here to the truth about what we now call UFOs or UAPs. "We're all prepared for a long campaign if necessary. We all know that eventually we shall win through and succeed in breaking the unfair silence curtain fabricated by the government. For just as surely as tomorrow's sun will rise, the governments of Britain and every other country must eventually tell you, the taxpayer, the truth." That's a very good point, don't you think? We are the people who pay for the government's work. Don't we deserve to know what they found? And even now, as I told you, the classified section was much longer than the unclassified. And those are prophetic words because millions, if not billions, now know that this is a very serious and very real subject. And I'll just take a couple of these recent polls. One's by YouGov in Britain and the other's by the Pew Research Center in the USA. And they came out last month. And here's just a couple of examples. 22% of Britons say that aliens have visited Earth, and another 28% believe aliens exist, so that's 50% who believe in them, and 29% don't believe that aliens exist. 62% believe that the UK government would keep evidence of UFOs secret. 62%. No British government gets 62% in an election, by the way. But they'll win with maybe 40% in this country, sometimes. And that's of voters, not of the public. 62% believe the UK government would keep evidence of UFOs secret. Only 18% believe it wouldn't. 1 in 5 Britons have seen a UFO or know someone who's seen a UFO. Millions in Britain alone. In the USA, 65% believe in intelligent life on other planets, 34% don't. 51% regard reports of UFOs by military personnel as evidence of intelligent alien life. The majority, even though the government themselves don't say they've got evidence. And over 30 million Americans are avidly following the UFO topic now. Not believing in it, but avidly following it. That's a big group of people in America alone. And those are just a few of the figures, so let's not be fooled into thinking this is a minority. By the way, if it was a minority belief, which it was at one time, could still be true, but things are changing, and that in itself is a good thing. The question is, though, what are we, and by we I mean humanity, going to actually do about this? I think, and I say this, I've done this myself since I was 18, so I think I can say it, that I think what people should do is to investigate the people upon Earth who claim or have claimed and have a track record and have a credibility behind that track record when it's looked into. They should investigate them. That's what I think that we should do. That may be what these UAPs are giving their signs to try and encourage us to do. We have some people who've claimed contact. I don't believe all of them. And I don't expect you to take my word that Dr. King was genuine. He was, actually. But I don't expect you to take my word for that. You can check it out. And I realize there is a prejudice or a disbelief from some, or a dislike from some, when you bring up channeling and telepathy and mediumship and all things psychic. And actually, although I've practiced as a psychic consultant and I've practiced channeling for decades, not with extraterrestrials, by the way, that's above my ability level. You know what I think it's Socrates is quoted as saying anyway, that he's the wisest man because he knows what he doesn't know. And I think a lot of mediums, with all due respect to them, could take a lesson from that. Got to know what you can do, but you've got to know what you can't do yet. But I can understand some people disparaging things like channeling in a way, because there is a lot of nonsense or foolish remarks and claims out there. Yes, there are some. Yes, there are some. But that doesn't mean there's no genuine ones. And if you dismiss something just because you don't really like the cut of its jib, as they used to say in this country, you don't like the way it comes over or what you've heard about it, you're closing the door to truth. Look into it, even if you don't particularly like the methodology. And if you do like the methodology, and I do like the methodology of channeling and psychic ability and telepathy, all the better. Look into it and check it out. It's not a time for prejudice, it's a time for truth. So I can't speak for any other claimants. I must say I don't believe many of them to be reliable, which doesn't mean they are liars, by the way. They probably believe it. Many of them, I think, do. I've met many, or some, and my finding is that most of them are quite genuine that they believe it. They're not out and out fakes, but it doesn't mean it's true. Lots of things, that's another lecture for another time. What can go wrong with channeling and psychic development if you aren't careful? But I can speak for Dr. George King. I knew him well, I saw him, I worked with him at close quarters, and even on occasions when he was in communication with extraterrestrial intelligences. For example, I was in a room with him in Arizona when he received a communication from a cosmic intelligence about intervention in what turned out to be the Chernobyl disaster just hours before it happened. And there's an account of this in my book, UFOs and the Extraterrestrial Message, if you want to get the full story. But I can say this, we published in that year, 1986, in which Chernobyl happened, in Cosmic Voice, that there had been UFO intervention in Chernobyl which lessened the terrible results of that tragic event. It certainly didn't stop them, but it lessened them. And that fact was confirmed by Pravda, which didn't know probably about our journal, in 2002, 16 years later, that there had been UFO intervention and it had lessened the effect. Now let me tell you that Dr. King wasn't picked for this task haphazardly. It wasn't just, oh, we like him, let's use him. He had trained in advanced forms of yoga for 8 hours a day on top of his job, because he had to earn a living. He didn't have money of his own that he'd inherited or something. He had to work. But for the 10 years following the Second World War, before he was even contacted to be a medium by cosmic intelligences, he was doing these advanced forms of yoga for 8 hours a day for 10 years. I don't think you're going to find another claimant who has a track record like that. That's 10 years, and then after the contact, being on call every day, every night, 24 hours a day, for 43 years until his passing. I just don't think there is one. Please let me know if you find one. Who even claims that? Doesn't necessarily mean that they're true, but it does mean that such a person, I think, is worthy of your investigation and formed an organization, the Aetherius Society, which has also been active since 1955, 365 days a year, every day, since that time, and is still extremely active today and is still actively cooperating with cosmic intelligences. Now, I say this not to blow our trumpet. If that's all that I wanted to do, or we wanted to do, then we wouldn't be worth listening to. If that's all we had to do with ourselves. It's not for that reason. I say it to encourage people who wish to investigate us. Because I believe the true message of the intelligences who watch over us from other planets, especially in this solar system, and who've been controlling spacecraft and visiting our world for thousands of years, is the key. They've come among us, and their message is one of spiritual action as the key to world in peace and enlightenment upon this and every other planet, by the way. Every other planet in the galaxy and beyond. If I had to put the cosmic message delivered by Dr. King in one word, and he received hundreds of communications over the years of great breadth and depth, containing spiritual, philosophical, and scientific teaching. But if I had to put it into one word, the word would be service. And as far as these intelligences are concerned, service is the key to solving all the problems in our world. And I would like to give you, if I may, one example. I'd like you to experience an example of one of these communications as it was received by Dr. King in a deep trance condition he'd attained, and this is an important point too, by the way, especially if you know about mediumship. And a deep trance condition he attained through his yoga practice called samadhi. And please bear in mind that this deep samadhic trance condition is very different from the technique adopted, well, certainly by any other medium I know of. And I have looked into it. It's a very deep thing. It's a lecture in itself, and it's a very interesting one, actually. It's the fruit of very advanced yoga practice. That's why he was chosen, because he could do that. That's certainly one of the reasons, anyway. Now, on April the 4th, 1958, Dr. King entered this condition at his residence in London with others present, and he received a historic communication From intelligence, I've already mentioned Mars Sector 6, and it was called Demand the Truth. And by the way, Dr. King did demand the truth. He went out in 1958 in August in a place called Trafalgar Square, major centre of London, and arranged a demonstration and a rally for the government to give us the truth about flying saucers. Can you imagine the reception in those days, in the 50s, saying that? But he did it. And so he followed the call to demand the truth. And we should still demand the truth because we've been given some truth, and that's appreciated, but it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. And some of the words are weasel words, such as there is no evidence of alien life. Those are weasel words, I suggest, ladies and gentlemen. So it's very relevant, this transmission I'm going to play you an extract from, to the subject of this talk and the happenings of this year in relation to UFOs. So I'd like to play you some recorded extracts from this transmission, which last for about 5 minutes in total.
It must be, and indeed is, obvious to all governments upon Terra that flying saucers are real, are physical, are friendly, are extraterrestrial. They cannot truthfully deny this. Yet through their specially conceived, carefully briefed propaganda organizations, as they do pour out official denial into the new syndicates of terror, as in the ordinary man is left in the dark. This is the great crime which is now being committed by most governmental propaganda machines throughout Terra regarding our existence and origin. Only a cooperation, only a concerted effort under the banner of a resolute cooperation upon your parts, or believers, will break this machinery to pieces. I would warn you, though, when some governments are forced by the masses to come forward with an admission of our existence, they will try to prove to the masses that we are unfriendly. I warn you about this before it happens, so that you may be forearmed by this foreknowledge. It is now up to you to take the initiative and work hard until you can break down this especially prepared diplomatic machinery, which has as one of its major functions the denial of the existence of a spacecraft in the skies of terror.
Well, I think you'll agree that is quite an amazing communication. I hope you will. And it's something I'm sure very new to many of you, and it might sound very unusual, certainly very powerful, and it's something to really think about, I believe, and ponder, and something which has been really validated in recent months and years. I think the cosmic intelligences have given their credentials to world governments, world leaders. I really think, and by the way, it's not just the Tic Tac, and it's not just things that they've covered, the 144 cases they've covered. I know of cases well before this, and not just in America. I know of one, for example, in the Soviet Union, where a craft landed in a place called Voronezh. An alien stepped out of it, and using some equipment caused someone in a crowd to disappear and then reappear, step back into the craft flew off and left indentations in the ground. I know that sounds like science fiction, but it's not. I personally brought that document to Britain from the Soviet news agency called TASS. During President Gorbachev's period, it must have reached the Russian government. They must know that was a demonstration. Those were credentials. That was proof. If you want the full story, look it up in my book, UFOs and the Extraterrestrial Message. You might find it elsewhere too. This isn't just what we're reading about now. They have been given the proof that should be enough for them. But the point is, it's not just about how governments respond, is it? If we relied on governments, where would we be? I think a lot of people are nodding when I say that. It's how we, the human race as a whole, respond. Is this just going to be a curiosity, which lasts until another one comes along? That other one might be the love life of a celebrity, or some sporting event, or some other bit of fairly important news, but nothing as great, as significant as this, and then we'll move on? Will it be another sensational news item to be buried by some other revelations? Or will humanity respond this time and take it further? Will people start to investigate seriously, as I'm suggesting, those who have a credible track record of contacts with the gods from space, the intelligences from other worlds? I suppose if we just base it on our history on Earth, we might well think that humanity is not that likely to change dramatically in the light of this Pentagon report. I don't want to be negative. There is one big change, though, and let me just say that. The stigma has gone. We can talk about it. I remember the days when I gave a talk and a husband of a woman stood up, told his sighting, and then the woman said, "Well, you never told me that. Why didn't you tell me that?" Because he was too embarrassed to tell his wife. Ridiculous. That's gone. Didn't bother me that much, but it bothered a lot of people. They felt they couldn't talk about it. Even policemen that I met felt they couldn't talk about it. Even military personnel felt they couldn't tell their colleagues. That's gone. So that's a positive. But is humanity as a whole going to change dramatically now that the credentials have been given in this way? Well, maybe a few will. Maybe a few will. Let's hope a few will. And maybe a few will act in what I would see as a logical way, and if you like, act in an intuitive way, by seeking the truth about the cosmic message. That's what we should be looking for. It's not the UFOs, is it? It's the beings who man them. What is there? Why are they here? What are they doing? Why are they controlling them? What is their message? And if they find it, as I believe they would, this few, through the Aetherius Society, then maybe some of those few will act upon it. And if so, then maybe those who are bringing their spacecraft to our world, allowing these radar tracking, satellite imagery, infrared camera photography, and observations by trained witnesses, maybe those who are bringing the craft in a way which should now be obvious to everyone, maybe they will regard that as at least as a step in the right direction. That can happen. That can happen. And I think that should happen. And I hope that will happen, that a few will do that. Because one thing these intelligences have made crystal clear through Dr. King is that they won't intervene beyond a certain point. They won't force us to change. They've given signs of their presence in our skies. They've made selective contacts through the centuries, and they've given their teachings at certain times. But they're waiting for us. They're waiting for us. It's for us to act, and they want us to do so. The question is, will we?